Hi there, welcome to another video from the Vickers MG Collection and Research Association. This is another of our question and answer videos where people have commented, asked questions specifically about something related to the Vickers MG, and we've done our best to try and answer them. Those that are a little bit complex or require a little bit more research or maybe even some firing have been put to the bottom of the queue for now, but we'll get to them soon enough. So if your question hasn't been answered, then it's probably on the list, but by all means ask it again and we'll make sure that we get round to it at some point soon. So thanks for watching as always. Thanks to those supporters on Patreon that are funding many of these activities at the moment, as we're not able to have visits to the collection. But please do make sure that you support and subscribe and like these videos, share them where you can, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and all those other social media outlets. But of course, always use the website to start with to try and answer some of these questions, because it makes it more interesting if we're able to identify new things and certainly make sure that we can research some stuff ourselves. Now, one of those questions that's come up as an email actually is how does combined sights work? It's something that's mentioned in many manuals as one of the fire direction techniques, combined sights. It features in the earliest material that we've got on the Vickers from around 1911 and that period. So Maxim derived information actually, combined sights. What does it actually mean and how does it work? So it's probably best to try and describe it on the blackboard. And let's try and use a white chalk there. So what you might have is an aiming point or an area 1,000 yards. Let's say 1,000 because it makes it nice and easy. You might have two guns firing at that. Two Maxims, two Vickers, whatever it may be, and you want to hit that 1,000-yard point, but you don't know. Maybe it's because it's not been possible to use a rangefinder, or it's obscured, so it's behind a crest, so it's indirect fire. You may want to be able to make sure that you're hitting that. Or make sure that you've got it covered. Now, a machine gun fires using a beaten zone. So that means that not everything fires and lands in one spot. It fires over an area that actually starts off, so you get 95% hit rate in the beaten zone determines the size of it, but we'll get some shots outside of that. But then what you have is this zone changes depending on the ballistics of the ammunition, and as you get further away it gets shallower but wider, so you end up getting quite a wide beaten zone. It will change from that to that over certain distances, out to the extreme range of the machine gun. But if you've got a target at 1,000 yards and you want to make sure that you're going to hit that, what you do is you get one of these guns to aim at 1,050 and one of these guns to aim at 950. And then, so these are theoretical ranges. There's a lot more covered in the manual. I haven't gone into exactly what the beaten zone is at these ranges, but it will vary slightly. But in theory, you then have these two beaten zones that will make sure that you're going to cover the area at 1,000 yards. Quite a Venn diagram really of machine gun fire. So you'll end up with those. That means that it'd be really dense fire in here, but actually the overall space that you'd normally be looking to fire, cover with beaten zones, is going to be a lot less dense fire in this area. But your chances of hitting that 1,000-yard spot. So what you're doing is combining the sights and combining the beaten zones of different guns. Now that can be extended out to 4 machine guns in the bottom here. And you might end up having 2 firing down here and 2 firing at the top in the further distance at 1,050 yards. But there's a number of different ways that you can combine this. There's some specific calculations that allow you to do it, but that is simply what they mean by combined sights. You're going to aim at 2 slightly different ranges, and then the overlapping area is what's going to get hit. You don't want it to be too far though. So I think it talks about the maximum range that you want above 1,200 yards is a 50-yard difference. So you might have 1025 975, or 2025 and 1975 if it's over 1,200 yards. If it's under though, you can have a 100-yard difference, because because these beaten zones change shape over that distance. So hopefully that helps. let's say it was a specific question about can I explain combined sights? So hopefully that explanation there works. Thank you. Now our next question was, how do you stop rust forming inside the barrel casing? So with the benefit of our skeletonized gun, it's always great. You can see there that actually there's been very little rust or corrosion or anything formed in that over the years. The manuals are quite quiet on this. It's really interesting. So if you look at points after firing, all it says is that you drain the barrel casing, and if there's a likelihood of corrosion, what you do is you make sure that the rear plug and the front plug in here, where is it? Can you just see that? Yeah, and the front plug are open to allow airflow through the barrel. Now the component parts inside that are likely to corrode are made of non-ferrous metal. So you can see the steam tube there is non-ferrous as well. No need to worry about those then. This tube isn't, but it's again no sign of rust or anything forming on that. The barrel, once you put that back in, has to be oiled again. And I'll tell you what, let's just have a look at the poster up here. So the barrel has to be re-oiled once it's put back in. So you've got some oil circulating in the water then. Now, when that's boiling up and steaming, that may well provide a coating on the inside of the barrel casing that stops that. I mean, I'm really unfamiliar with it. So it's an interesting problem and an interesting question that I'd love to have looked at more. But as I said, there's very little to talk about in the manuals, so I can't really answer it in its entirety, other than to say, points after firing say, to leave these plug holes, these drain plugs open so that you have air flowing through the casing and to allow evaporation and water to fire off. So yeah, I mean, this is steel, this is ferrous metal, so the inside, it doesn't look like it's coated with anything, so the inside would be ferrous as well. But clearly not a problem that was considered worthy enough to write in the standard training manuals. So a simple question to answer. They didn't worry too much, but you do have oil to oil that barrel once you reinsert it, and that seems to solve the problems. Now this question was in response to one of our Instagram posts. What were the SAS doing with the Vickers MG in North Africa? Now, looking at all the material, the war establishments, it seems they didn't have the standard Mark 1 Vickers machine gun, the water-cooled variant. They probably had acquired some, and you certainly see them in use with the long-range desert group, so they exist in theatre, obviously, and they're as part of Special Forces Middle East. But they were the SAS, the Special Air Service, these chaps, who dares wins, were using the Vickers gas operated. So they had these mounted all across the Jeeps. Some they had with aircraft Brownings alongside them as well, but they certainly had the Vickers gas operated, high rate of fire, 1,000 rounds a minute, or 950, with a 100-round drum magazine, mixed ball, armour piercing, tracer in the magazines, twin mounted like this. This is actually a mount from a later Northwest Europe use SAS Jeep, but there were simpler mountings in the desert, but they did have them twin mounted like that, sometimes twin mounted on the back as well. The sight of a single gun on the driver's side seems to be a Northwest Europe thing, but certainly the passenger would be equipped with 2 of these. So they're using those as the main Jeep armament for raiding airfields, anti-ambush. By using the drum magazine in the way they were, they had access to the full range of 303 types, let's say armour piercing, incendiary, tracer, semi-armor, all of that stuff. So a really versatile weapon being used like that. So that's how principally the SAS were using the Vickers machine guns in North Africa. They seem to then go on to Italy and use the Mark 1 gun and parachute in with it. So what I mean by that, the Mark 1 water-cooled Vickers machine gun. The medium machine gun, they seem to parachute into Italy with those, but these seem to have gone away by that point or are just on their Jeeps. So hopefully that's just a brief overview. Obviously we've got more videos on the Vickers K that you'll be able to watch for a lot more detail. Another query that came up was to explain the different water jackets in the Vickers machine guns. So traditionally we notice the fluted jacket or the barrel casing. We must try and get water jacket isn't the correct term for them. Barrel casing. These are the barrel casings. So barrel casing, the fluted type, and then the smooth type. But what I wanted to do is just I'll take the camera off the stand in a minute and just have a look. But what you generally have is the fluted type exists in the first production guns. This is the characteristic light pattern Vickers Maxim designed from 1906. That's when it first appears. It then goes into the 1908, which is the Vickers machine gun as you see it, the Class C. And it's used in British service guns when it's adopted in 1912 and throughout the First World War. However, towards the end of the First World War, you start to see some smooth jacket Vickers come in. And what you've got on these smooth jacket Vickers, and this is why it's important to take a closer look at it, is you've got this spinning, you've got tooling marks basically that show how it was spun down to try and save some weight. So this seems to be the outside diameter here, and then the middle section is recessed probably an eighth of an inch, maybe a little bit more, maybe a quarter of an inch on the centre there, an eighth step down here. And it's being spun to get rid of any of the excess material. Because what they can't do is take a single block of steel and draw it or extrude the metal at this point. The technology doesn't exist. That doesn't come until the Australians just know how to do it. So you have these tooling marks on First World War Vickers machine guns with a smooth jacket. But the Second World War Vickers, which is this one here, 1943-44 manufacture, is completely smooth. It doesn't have any of these tooling marks. It's pretty rough finish on this one because it's painted. It's been hand painted, but you can see that it is truly smooth. There are none of these similar tooling marks. Now, you do see some some fluted jacket barrel casings appear in the Second World War. Mainly because Vickers go on and produce commercial guns right through the 20s and 30s, and those are sold largely with a fluted jacket because it's lighter. These are slightly thicker metal to give it the same strength that the fluting does as the sort of reinforcing ribs on this gun here. So you do see these appear in the Second World War, with the last ones being some of the internationally supplied War Office contract guns to Egypt and Iraq. So they do appear. They do also appear as V series, so British V series guns as well, because we think they were literally using up stocks that they'd been building of these. And the guns they don't get matched with a gun and numbered until the gun is made and going out the factory. So you build up the barrel casings and then affix it to trunnions and send it as a complete gun. So you do see some British War Office stocks, but anything new manufacture was being made in these smooth designs for a number of reasons, because they're easier to repair. This you can't repair very easily, and you do have the water jacket repair kits, which we'll cover separately in another video, which is a pad of plasticine, basically a rubber pad, some clips that go round it, and a metal plate that pushes against those clips. That's not easy to do with this. You need sort of more flexible rubber, but with the smooth jackets you can. So if this gets pierced, you can repair it a lot easier, not just so not necessarily worried about the weight. And also the weight difference is considerable. So this is our earliest gun in the collection, and this is the latest, well, one of the latest. This is the latest British manufacturer one, and there's about 3 kilograms difference between these two guns because of the lack of machining on this gun. We've covered that in a blog post, but so it's interesting to see how the weight becomes less of an issue, where production speed rather than quality is the balance, is the payoff there really. And these are quite similar in weight guns, so they've gone from that early light gun through to the late war production heavier gun in the space of the First World War, because they're producing so many more. But yeah, so you've got these 3 types of water jacket really. You've got the Great War, the fluted. There's very little difference between a fluted Great War gun and a commercial Second World War gun. Or pre-Second World War guns, so no need to show those, but we do have the video on them. And then you've got the late First World War smooth jackets, and then the Second World War smooth jackets, and all the Australian guns are this smooth jacket as well. And actually they look a little bit smoother because they're a little bit more refined. So hopefully that covers all of that for you. As always, any questions, please post them in the comments below. On to our last question for this video, and what we've got here in front of us are 3 of the tangent sight scales for the Vickers machine gun. Now the question was, what is the effective range of a Vickers? And it depends on the period, and these scales go to show that. So these are all made for Mark 7 ammunition, 303 Mark 7. You can just see the 3037 there, 303 VII, Roman numerals up there. And these are the number 2 Mark 1 scale. And what have we got? Yeah, they're all number 2 Mark 1. And they're all made out for Mark 7 ammunition because the Vickers was introduced after the Mark 6. So it's worth saying that you get Maxims in Mark 6 ammunition, and some of the manuals include conversion tables for Mark 6 to Mark 7, but we're not aware that any of the Vickers actually ever came in Mark 6 ammunition. All the British War Office production was Mark 7. So they're ranged up to 2,900 yards, and you can just see the top of that there, 2,900. And this is one of our earliest ones, so it's got the VSM mark in there for Vickers Sons and Maxim, dates it to the Great War period or just after. And this is the effective range for direct fire, for Mark 7 ammunition, be that direct or indirect. You can do indirect fire with Mark 7 ammunition. Remember, in this context, direct fire is targets that you can see. Indirect fire are targets that are obscured by something, be that it's night, or it's there's a hill in the way, or smoke, fog, all of those sorts of things. So they're obscured. You can do direct and indirect fire up to 2,900 yards. What they do say though is that the effective range is more like 2,000 yards. So at that point the beaten zone is smaller, and I talked about beaten zones in the first question on this vid. So the beaten zone is smaller, so you get a higher density of ammunition falling in that area, up to 2,000 yards. And clearly for a direct fire, so targets you can see, anything beyond 2,000 yards is going to be difficult to see as well, unless it's a large body of troops or something like that moving. So 2,000 yards is the maximum effective range. 2,000 to 3,000 is then possible with this, which is the same for any 303 Mark 7 ammunition. It loses its puff, the muzzle velocity goes out of it by the 2,900 yards there. So that's Mark 7 ammunition. However, in the 1930s, and it had been tried for many years, they were trying to look at what a longer range ammunition could do. So they introduced a Mark 8Z streamline ammunition. Now this is a boat-tailed bullet, so that it has less tumble in the air and less air resistance. So it's boat-tailed, and you can see that in the diagrams that are on the screen now. Slightly different design. Otherwise, it seems to be the same design bullet, slightly different weight, but you have a different propellant in there as well. And you have nitrocellulose being used rather than cordite. And that gives us the Mark 8Z ammunition. If we turn this over, you can see that this range scale has Mark 8Z. Now Z indicates that it does have the nitrocellulose content rather than cordite propellant, so that it burns hotter, brighter, so you get greater range on this. And this goes all the way up to 3,700 yards on the tangent sight scale. So 2,900 all the way down here. As a different elevation. So where's that 2,900? Here. Same as 2,300. So you had to convert that if you were going to use these sights. And there were conversion tables available, and we'll put a picture of one of those on the screen. But for the tangent sight, you could use it up to 3,700 yards, which is quite remarkable. But just say that again. If you've got one of these slides on your tangent sight scale on your gun, just whip it off. 2 little screws go in here. Just take it off and just flip it over to see whether you're lucky enough to have one of these reversed ones. Particularly if you've got a British V or W serial Vickers machine gun, because that's how we found one of these. That's how we have one spare. We have some on the guns, on our later guns, but this spare was found on a spare tangent sight that we had in the collection. So we just turned it over and found that. So if you've got a later one, worth doing, let's say, because these are quite remarkable. Sometimes they look completely different as well, because they are the normal slide with it engraved on the back, having been sent back to the small arms factory to have that engraved. So that is the tangent sight. But what's quite spectacular is when you then bring out the dial sight, which many of you will be familiar with. Fits on the side of the gun, allows for indirect fire because you use the lensatic sight on top here. And we'll have to do a lot more videos on this. We want to do the full training series. So you use the lensatic sight to be able to look through at a aiming mark, not at the target, at an aiming mark. So that's what your aiming post and your aiming lamp's used for. But when you're doing indirect fire, this drum here actually goes all the way up to 4,500 yards. Now that's 2.7, 2.8 miles, so a really long range, or 4.1 kilometres for the metric people amongst you, for the cyclists, because we all work in kilometres. Now, you've got 4,500 yards on using the dial sight. That's because you're doing map predictive fire, you're doing indirect fire based on observations of somebody else ahead of you, blah, blah, blah. You can't, you don't need to see it effectively. So that's why this is for an aiming mark, not for a, it's not a telescopic or a sight. It's a lensatic sight. You can't actually see what you're looking at. So say up to 4,500 yards, Mark 8Z ammunition. So up from the 3,000. Where have I put that one? Up from the 3,000, turned it over, got it lost, up for the 3,700 yards that we've got on the tangent sight. So let's say you use the dial sight, you get that extra punch out to 4,500 yards. That's maximum elevation on the gun. You can add some angle here worked out from the range tables, but that is quite an elevation. So you can see my finger would be the axis of the barrel at that point. So yeah, huge elevation, but really impressive. Reaching out to 4,500 yards with small arms ammunition with a beaten zone is something you only do when you've got 4 guns together, at least. And perhaps we'll talk about some of that more in the new year. But it certainly makes a difference to the capability of the infantry battalion. So there you go. I hope that's answered those questions for those that asked them. And anybody else, please do come up with more questions and let us know in the comments, email, whatever. We'll try and use this medium to explain the more complex issues. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. Please support us on Patreon if you're able to, and let us know of anything you'd like to see in the future. I look forward to hearing from you.